different stages in the marriage process. So we have a few stages. Number one is the khitbah, which is the proposal. Right? You have the proposal and the engagement, and then you have the nikah. You have the proposal, you have the nikah, then you have the bridal send-off when she actually goes to live with her husband, and then you have the walima. You have the walima. So you can say these are the major, the major things that have some sort of, that have some standing in Islam. And then there's many cultural items. There's many cultural ceremonies, and we'll discuss those as well. But I want this to be, like, I want you guys to think about, as we're going through this, and we're talking about the different rituals, or the different ceremonies, I want everyone to think about, mashallah, most people here are married. So probably it's going to be, this will come more in use that when you think about getting your own children married. So many of you must have seen different situations which didn't go so well. So if you can, as we're going through this, just note those in your mind, and even you can bring it up during or right after, and then we'll discuss those and evaluate from an Islamic lens. Why? Because there's many questions that people have about the different ceremonies. Like, is this from the Sunnah? Should we do this? Should it be simple? Should it not be simple? Is it allowed to make it? Is it allowed to have rent a big hall, a fancy hall? Many questions like this. Is it things that lead to problems later on, which we maybe think that they're allowed, but they're actually prohibited, or things we think that may be prohibited, but maybe it's not so strict, right? There are certain elements that are they're more strict, or we have to be more strict upon them back home where we came from, but maybe they're not so. It's not so important to be strict here, and there's other elements which it was not so important to be strict on them back home, but it's much more important to be strict on them here. So keep these things in mind, and I want you guys to build a list of questions, whatever comes to mind, especially things that led to practical problems, and then we can, inshallah, discuss those at the end. So the first one is the engagement period. So here we're not discussing, we're not discussing yet who to get married to whom to send a proposal. We're just going through the different stages and evaluating their standing according to Islam, and what should be done, and what is the what allowance do we have to go on cultural practices. So the engagement period, this is when for example the side of the groom, generally it's the side of the groom who's going to proceed with sending a proposal. Now it's not necessary that the boy's side, the man's side, is the one to initiate the proposal. That can also come from the side of the girl, but there are considerations. Number one, the default is the man is the one who's going to send the proposal, right? Because biologically Allah Ta'ala has made the man the seeker. So the man is going to be the one who's going to be sending the proposal, and usually it will be through an intermediary. So even if he himself directly is sending if he's sending a proposal, he'll send send someone on his side, and that person will go to the father of the girl, or he'll go to some relative of the girl, to the girl's family, and through this medium, that proposal will be sent. Now the tricky part is, because we're living in America, there's many people actually who don't have their families here. They don't have their families here, or you don't have that strong family system through which you're well aware. Many people are not connected to the community. And you see, subhanAllah, the people who are well connected, who come to the masjid frequently, they socialize, they have family gatherings, or they're attached to, for example, different organizations, or they have a strong bond with the community members, or tabligh, for example, or you have the different dhikr groups. So when you have a strong knit group, it's more easy to be aware of, okay, this family has a girl, this family has, they have a potential groom, they have a potential bride. And then it's much easier to initiate those kinds of things. But if you're somebody who's not very connected, the first step is you should be connected. You should invite people over, and you should, you and your wife, you should seek to to establish a connection with people. Because then you'll be able to, for your own children, you'll be able to much more easily send proposals and just be aware. But let's say somebody, they want to send a proposal, so you should first, the default should never be that I just saw someone on the street and they look nice, so I just want to send a proposal. So this kind of goes more into like to whom we should send a proposal, so I don't want to get deep into that. But in general, it should be through intermediaries. So now let's say that the proposal is sent, and or from the woman's side, if she wants to send a proposal, she can tell someone, tell some family member to reach out to some family members. And usually when the girl's side initiates, it's not a direct proposal. Usually, this is what we've seen. When the girl's side, when they initiate, it's more suggestive. Whereas from the man's side, it's more direct. The man's side, the family would directly propose through an intermediary. But from the girl's side, it will be, they'll tell some family member or somebody, some person, to bring it up to them. To bring this up, to touch this topic, and just see their reaction. And that person, that family will get the ishara, because they know how things work. So they'll get the ishara, the indication that that family may be interested. Otherwise, this wouldn't have just come up. So when they get the indication, that means they kind of have a green light from there. So then they'll go ahead, if they're interested, and send the proposal. And if not, then, which happens a lot, they'll just ignore it and move on with their life, right? And go somewhere else. So it can come from either side, but the cultural ways of proposing, like I said, this difference between if it's initiated from the guy's side or if it's initiated from the girl's side, the cultural points are very important. And we should not just think, there's many people, they will say, oh, this is just culture. And they'll try to completely divorce Islam from culture. This is wrong. Because all of our cultures that developed against an Islamic backdrop, they have Islamic components in them. All of these things, they've been developed against Islam. So it's not just coming from a vacuum. These small things, sometimes they're pure tradition, and sometimes they go against Islam. But frequently, quite often, they are actually purely a part of Islamic values and ethics. You won't find a nas on it. You won't find something from Quran or Hadith that said it should be like this. But because the entire Islamic value system has been embedded in this culture, they naturally tended towards these kinds of behaviors, right? So this is how the proposal should be when it, depending on which side it's coming from. So now, there are usually what's going to happen. You have different different types of ceremonies or different types of, you can say, riwaj, rituals, in different ways where people will do it. Many times, they'll send it through. There'll be an intermediary, and then there'll be a verbal agreement, and then there'll be a formal where the guy's family will come to the girl's house, and there may be, of course, even between them, there's going to be meetings. But between the proposal and the engagement, it is highly recommended, sunnah by the Prophet ﷺ, that you should go see the girl. You should go see the girl. Why? Because there's a higher chance of mahabba. So now, there was one Sahabi, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, I'm going to get married. So the Prophet asked him, did you see the girl? He said, no, I didn't see her. He said, go and see her, because that increases the chances of there being mahabba. Now, this doesn't mean that there should be long, period between, but it does mean, it can hurt the girl. And it is actually in your interest to make sure that the suitor sees your daughter, or that your son sees the girl that he's proposing to. Why? Because if he marries without seeing, maybe he relied on this doesn't happen so much in America, but I have seen such instances. I'll give you one example. One time, my sister's married now, but some time ago when she was getting married, so there were suitors coming. So there was one person, one family they came to propose, and it was a so-called religious family, and we knew one person in the middle. So my father asked about the suitor, and the person said, "Oh, he's so good. He's XYZ, very very good." So now when the family they came to visit, we saw that, or even on the phone when we were talking, he's saying that, "Look, I trust my mother completely. Whatever my parents say, whatever my mother said, I'm gonna go with that." So I don't have any need to talk to the girl. I don't have any need to see the girl. And, real like wali of Allah, mashallah. So, a true saint. So I have no need to see the girl. So we thought maybe he's just under pressure or something. So anyway, when they came, so then when we were sitting, the men were in one room, the women were in another room. So now, my father's talking, and sometimes he'll ask the boy some question. But when he would ask the boy some question, then his father would respond. So his father's responding. And so my dad, he tells me and my brother, hey, just take him in another room and just maybe he'll open up. Because maybe he's just like in front of his father or something. And even that was already a red flag. It was too big of a red flag. But he said, okay, go take him in the other room and just see. Maybe he'll open up with people of his age. So we took him and we're talking and it's the exact same. The exact same, no change. And, he had no, he didn't even want to see the girl. Now, there's many problems with this. What are the problems? Let's say that you, as a man, you rely on your mother, you rely on somebody else, that this girl is good. But when you actually get married, maybe when you get at the end, you're bashar, you're a human being. If you don't like this girl yourself so much, then this may cause you problems. And many a times it happens that the mother's taste is not the way we all know, the way women, they see beauty and the way men see beauty, it's very different. The girls, they'll be wearing, ajib types of makeup and they're appreciating it on each other. And when a man sees it, he's like, what are you doing? This looks terrible. So if you're trusting, this is not actually it's not very appreciative or appreciable. So at least one time, there should be, you should see the girl just to make sure that there is a basic level of attraction and compatibility. Even if that's not the main thing. That doesn't have to be the main thing, but it's something that should take place. Now, in general, back home, you didn't need so many sittings or anything. Why? Because the expectation of what a woman is going to be, it was very simple. A woman, everybody knows she's going to come, she's going to cook, she's going to clean, she's going to be she's going to fit in with the extended family, and that's it. This was very well known, and the disparity factor or the delta was not so much. Right? Every girl is pretty much going to fit into the same expectation. But now, because you have so many, because of feminism, basically, you have many women who have their own ambitions, their own goals, and it doesn't fit into that narrow expectation window. So because of this, you have to be a lot more careful. You have to be a lot more careful. And even for the guy, just because someone is religious, it doesn't mean that you just go ahead and go with it. Right? So for example, this person, in the example I mentioned, there is a level of natural excitement that should exist in a man when he's getting married. So when you see the man is, he wants to see the girl and this is healthy. This is healthy and it should exist. Having this idea of like a perfect saint this is not realistic. So there should be a level of excitement, there should be a level of passion, but it should be guarded by Islam. So things should be normal. Things should be normal. This is very important. So, when you're proposing now, normally you would not need to go through all these exercises, but it may be important to ask certain questions. Do you see? There's. I know multiple people. They come to me and they ask me questions. Okay, I got married and now my wife said, okay, let's put children on the shelf for now. Let's put children on the shelf. We won't have children right now. So he's getting married and immediately she's dictating. And she's been given instructions from her mom that make sure that you don't have kids right away. Wait for a few months, 5-6 months, make sure everything goes okay, only then do it. This is not the way the dynamic should be in marriage. In marriage, no one has a right to deprive anyone of children right from the beginning, and the man should be the one, actually I say this is a big mistake that a man makes. If he accepts this kind of thing in the beginning, he should immediately be ready for children, and he should make it clear. And even when you're asking questions, it shouldn't be in a way when you're asking questions during the proposal process, it shouldn't be in a way where you're handing her authority. Like, okay, would you like to have children like this? It should be, my expectation is I'm going to have children right away. Are you aligned with this? Or something, it doesn't have to be worded the same way, but it's important that it's worded in a way that after marriage, she doesn't feel that you were asking her in a consultative manner. Because you have to make sure you have the upper hand. You have to make sure you maintain the upper hand after marriage. Otherwise, if you ask in a way which is ceding her, giving her authority, then you are going to be under her after marriage, and this will lead to many problems. So now, yes, it is important to ask some questions, and even the girl should ask questions. And the men, the family of the girl, they should really see and make sure that he is, not involved in drugs or any other things. Ask around, and and likewise the other way. So now, when it comes to the ceremonies, there's no shari'i ceremony, or engagement itself doesn't have any standing in Sharia other than a wa'd. Engagement means it's a promise to marry. It's a promise to marry. So all the homework should be done before you agree to get married. Because when you're agreeing, you're promising to get married. So you do all your homework before. The engagement period, it shouldn't be treated like a time to just to get to know each other. It should, yes, like the families can, sometimes things come up in the engagement period, and you realize that really this family, there are problems here. So from that angle, yes, it can be a good, it can be a time where you break the engagement because you see something that there's it's problematic. But you shouldn't go into anything like this with this intention. Ideally, from before, you should ask around as much as possible before you get engaged about the family, about the boy, about the girl. When you do this, then you'll have all this prerequisite information. So when you do the engagement, it should be very solid. It should be that we're planning on getting married, and there should be no long engagement. Long engagements are they're a big disaster, because the whole point of marriage is to avoid zina. And many, many, many times when you have long engagements, especially when they're living very close, or in the same, in the same state, the same city, or even in the states, even in the same country, it's not very difficult for them to have access to each other. And what a disaster that they're doing zina when they were actually going to get married. So this is something which is, a big disaster. So the engagements, they should be short as possible. Now, many times what happens is there's no choice, because, for example, you're getting married from overseas. You have to sponsor, and you have to wait 2 years, 3 years, whatever. So in that case, this is a very delicate situation, because I've seen many times where people, they get married overseas, and then their immigration process, depending on which country you're from, it can be very long. And because they've already consummated the marriage, it's like kind of it's a catch-22. Because if you don't, you want to, okay, well, if you consummate the marriage, and let's say this process takes very long. There was one person, he waited 7 years. I know one person waited 7 years, and another person who's still going, and he's on, I think, 7 years, and he still doesn't know. But because they consummated the marriage, now they cannot end it. If they had not consummated, they could have done the divorce early on, because they're like, okay, this is not going anywhere. Better than wasting a huge part of our life. Sometimes this doesn't sound good, but sometimes these kinds of rational decisions, when you're in those situations, because I know those people, they were in a situation they kind of wanted to. And if there was no consummation, then it would have been acceptable socially. Even the girl, she could have said, yeah, there was never any consummation, so she could have gone right ahead and gotten married again, and it would have been easy. But when you're marrying in the States, then it should be very, very quick. Like there should not be a long engagement period. I know at least a couple examples where the engagement period was like 2-3 years, and then towards the end of the engagement period, because the longer the engagement period, the more chance of conflict between the families. And you haven't had the investment in marriage yet where you are forced to work things out. So it's sometimes on a small thing, a fire can start and everything can burn to the ground. So I know a couple examples where at the end of the engagement period, the whole thing dissolved, and for no good reason. And a few years of the girl's life just went to waste. So this is something really, it burns the heart, where you see like 2, 3, 4 years being wasted, and now you have to start from scratch. Because the girl, her options are, they're at the peak when she's younger. The older she gets, and especially now when women are getting married later and later. Now, for example, you get married at 26, 27, 28. Now at the age of 28, many more people, more than ever, are getting married in their early 30s. At this time, you cannot afford long engagements. And you cannot afford that this ends up in a disaster after 2 years. So it's very important that the engagement period is short, and even if it's going to be a little longer, once you're sure, just do the nikah. For example, if it's 2-3 months, no problem. You can wait, but make sure there's no private communication, right? There's no private communication. Once it's set, they've talked before the engagement. Once you're engaged, that's it. You cut all communication and you wait until the nikah. Sure, maybe if there's a couple, if there's like 3 months, the family comes once to see, or something in the middle, very reserved. It shouldn't be where they're mingling. If you have the intention that they're going to mingle, just do their nikah. Do a very simple nikah, no problem. You can even do another nikah, like a more formal nikah, a bigger nikah, but you announce the nikah. Make a formal, make a nikah initially, and just so that there's no problem between them. Let them, they can interact and they can talk, and especially if it's going to be for a long time. This will save them from sins. So long engagements are things that should be avoided, and they cause a lot of pain, actually. Many times you see that if they're in school, for example, they're not able to focus on their schoolwork anymore because they're just messaging constantly for years. And one of the beautiful things in marriage is when things happen immediately, then you learn everything about your wife immediately after marriage. You learn everything when the physical moving in happens. But now there's kind of an artificial thing that happens where you get engaged and you're not living together. So for 2 years you're getting to know each other without any physical, connection. And then you do part 2, later on. So this creates some sort of artificial, you get to know the person from one angle, and then when problems happen in normal married life, so let's say there's a problem, you're able to solve it physically, means you're seeing the person, but let's say you have fights when you're over the phone, or let's say there's a lot of problems. There's passion, that leads to problem. There's fights, that leads to problem. Everything leads to a problem when there's no physical, proximity. So this is another reason why this should not happen. So now, now let's say you come all the way to the nikah period, and actually one more thing, the family should overlook, there should not. It's very common, unfortunately, that people, they catch small things. There's small things. Oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? This formality wasn't done. That formality wasn't done. You didn't give this respect. You didn't give that respect. And those formalities, to some degree, it's kind of a nuanced matter. Matter how seriously those things should be taken. Now, there's 2 extremes. One is that completely disregard. This is like the American mentality. I don't need any formalities. Nothing is important. And the other extreme is like being very, very picky on very small things. So we should be somewhere in the middle, where yes, a lot of times these formalities have some basis in human biology, in sociology. Like, for example, I'll give you one example. When the girl is being sent off to the home of the guy, so a lot of times the family of the man will come to take the girl. Now, is it written anywhere in Sharia that the whole family should come? No, he can just come. Rather, she can take an Uber and go to his house. But would anybody feel comfortable like that? Who's going to feel comfortable? So, well, she can do it. It's not written in the Quran that she cannot take an Uber. But which fool will do something like this? Because this is something common sense. You want to make sure when you send your daughter off that you're sending her with full respect. And when the family comes with the whole family comes, it's like the whole qabila is accepting her into their family. So this shows honor to the girl, gives her dignity, and all of this is from the maqasid of Sharia. Now the problem can come when you have excessive formalities which increase the financial burden. So financial burden should always be minimized. In Islam, as a rule, Allah Ta'ala has kept the financial burden on the man. And for the woman, for her side, there's no financial burden. Can they do anything? Yes, they can. And many times they will. This is part of, for example, giving the groom a gift from the father, from the mother. These things are normal. And you would do it anyways from the goodness of your heart. This is somebody who's taking your daughter. So why wouldn't you give him a gift? But I've seen many people who take that to the extreme also, that no, there's nothing like this in Islam. So I don't have to give any gift. So this is foolishness. You should give a gift, but yes, whatever that gift is, it should be given from the heart, and the person, it should be, and the person also, he should not look down upon whatever the gift is, even if it's something small, because this is what the person can afford. There should not be a sort of like tension that I have to maintain this level of financial giving from the side of the girl, because if this happens, then there's going to be a lot of stress in getting the girls married. So we should take things easy, and small problems we should forgive them. But yes, sometimes there can be serious red flags, and before the marriage, this is a time when you're going into it wholeheartedly. But in the engagement period, if any serious red flags come up, then those should be taken seriously, right? Because why? Because you're, at the end of the day, you're sending your daughter off, or your son is taking in a girl. So if there are serious red flags that come up that you didn't know before, new information, right? Something which is new, and it's not just like, oh, you didn't, a small formality that someone forgot, but a complete, like a complete lack of something which is very big. Now, I don't want to spell every single thing out. Then in those cases, actions can and maybe should be taken, because you don't want to, at the end of the day, up until the nikah, you're still her wali. Up until the nikah, you are her wali, you are her protector, and if you see something which is against her, which is against what you were expecting in the beginning, something which is very serious, there's no problem. You should break it off, and sometimes you shouldn't even fear the social backlash if it's something which is very serious. So now, when it comes to nikah, there has to be a mahar. The nikah has to be, the best is it's done in a masjid. It's done in the masjid on Friday, ideally. And you have, the two witnesses. It should be announced. It should be announced. It should be made public. It shouldn't be done in private. There's private nikah. This is also, a topic of discussion, but this is something very problematic. The girl, she should have a wakil. Her father should represent her, and he'll marry her off. So he'll give the jawab on her behalf, or he'll get the jawab from her. And it should be connected by someone who's pious, who's a scholar, and it's actually important. It should be a scholar, so he knows the fiqh of what he's doing. And in the Hanafi fiqh, the girl's consent is required. Now, even this, there's differences of opinion before bulugh and then after bulugh between madhahib. But in general, I think it's a custom that Muslims, of course, you're going to get your daughter's consent. But it doesn't mean that we're consent absolutists. What does that mean? There are cases where the father can give consent on behalf of the girl, especially when she's madun al-bulugh, when she's below the age of puberty. And in the other madhahib, there may even be other opinions after puberty. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, after for example, if she has been married before, and then she gets divorced or widowed, now she is completely, she has the full authority. She has the full authority. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that the woman who is divorced or widowed, she is more, she has more autonomy over herself than her wali. So yes, because the father in Islam, he's going to be looking out for the best interest of his daughter. So there is a level of authority that he has. Now the mahar, every girl will have a different mahar according to her socio-economic status. But the Prophet ﷺ said that the best nikah is the one, أَيْسَرُهَا مَؤُونَةً, the one that is the least, which has the least, you can say, cost, the one which is the easiest, right? So we shouldn't be overburdening in our mahar as well. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be so less. It doesn't need to be just, make it free or $1 or surah mulk if you don't have to. These are for the cases when there's no other choice, right? So, like I know there was one person I remember, he did that where the mahar was just surah mulk, but the family is a rich family. So, I don't think that's something that should be appreciated, right? Because he can take a loan from his father, and he was someone who was, he was about to do very well. So in those cases, yes, a mahar should be respectable, it should be decent, but it shouldn't be extreme. Why? Because if you set it too high, then you won't find anybody. So you make it easy and look more for look at the person more. If the person is good and you feel satisfied, no problem, be easy on the mahar. But yes, there's a concept in Sharia called mahrul mithil. means this girl in her family, especially in her paternal side, what kind of mahar does her, in Arabic it's called sadaq also, what kind of mahar do the girls in her family get? And if you go give below this, then it may be seen as a disgrace or humiliating for the family. Especially this is more the culture in Arab countries. The mahar, it should be a decent amount, but it doesn't need to be extreme. A few $1,000s is fine. But yes, if for example, you have families who are multimillionaires or they have hundreds of millions, for them to give, to set a mahar of 50,000, 100,000, for them it won't be a big deal. But you have people, unfortunately, who are just normal. Like you have a girl, your own family, their family of the background is farmers, and they're struggling. They don't have much themselves, and you're expecting a mahar of 50,000. I want a mahar of your 1 year salary or something. This is ridiculous. Set a reasonable mahar so you can get married. But like I said, don't set it too low also, where it's just absolutely nothing. Set at least here generally people can do 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, even 10,000, but that's maybe the higher end. So a few thousand is fine. But it's up to everyone to decide. The girl's family, they have the right to set whatever they want, and if the guy's side, they can negotiate. But if they may not agree, they may say, no, we want this much. Below this, we will not agree. So mahar is, or sadaq, this is like sadaqah, it comes from sincerity. It's a gift of sincerity, showing your goodwill towards the girl. I'm going to take you, and I'm going to be, I'm going to be taking care of you. So here is a sort of indication, right? It's an indication that I'm going to take care of you. So, yes. Yeah, so Surah Mulk means like if you in your mahar you say, I'll teach you Suratul Mulk. And there's many ahadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a sahabi came, he didn't have much, so the Prophet said, okay, no problem. You can, because at that time, if they didn't have much finance, if a person doesn't have much, but he has the prospect, he can take care of her, but he doesn't have enough for mahar right now. So no problem, just give her Surah Mulk. Do something that shows this investment in her. But we're talking about this situation, so we shouldn't minimize that as well. Meaning, yes, there are situations when that's okay, when that should be done. And that also is reviving a sunnah. But if you have money, then you should give the money, right? This is the best form of mahar. And so then you have the marriage contract. So when the girl also, she can appoint her wakil. Sometimes as a matter of custom, for example, if it's the father or the grandfather, they'll come to the girl and the family will see, and then she'll say that, okay, I appoint you as my wakil. But this is not necessary. Even without that, it's okay. But it's sometimes like a nice custom. So the girl, she can, she will appoint her wakil, and the wakil will conduct the marriage on her behalf. Or So a lot of times, even in the masjid, if it happens in the masjid, the father will go and get the permission right then, or he'll have it from before already. So in the marriage contract, you don't need a physical contract for the marriage to be valid. You just need someone to conduct the nikah, 2 witnesses, and ijab and qabul from both sides. But in a contract, there can be a physical contract, and there is always. In this physical contract, more things can be stipulated, more conditions, and so on and so forth, but not every condition is acceptable. So there may be conditions, but this can actually be used to your advantage. So an example of a condition that somebody may want to set. For example, let's say that there was a man, he married a woman, and then for a long time he used to, let's say, really beat her, like for no reason, and XYZ, and then he refused to divorce her. He refused to divorce her, or whatever. I don't want to say beat her, but whatever, the point is that there was something which was really, according to Sharia, it was not good. But he was fulfilling her basic hukuk, and now to annul a marriage is very difficult. So he refused, I'm not going to divorce, and then after a long time he gave her divorce. Now, in the second time, she said, okay, I want to go back to him. She said, I want to go back to him. For whatever reason, it's her choice. She said, I want to go back to him because she's not getting anyone else. And then she did the assessment in her mind that maybe I was also doing something wrong, and this was causing it, and now I don't have anybody. It's better to go to him, and also I can compromise a little bit, and it'll be okay. But now in this second marriage contract, maybe they put because they want to avoid the scenario of her, of him not divorcing her. So they say, okay, the power of, if we do this marriage, then your divorce can also be pronounced by this male member of her family, for example. He can do it's an extension of his divorce right. And it prevents this scenario. I hope that makes sense. So it can be used as, you can have additional stipulations, but there are some stipulations which are considered, they're batil conditions. One example is, a woman, she says, you cannot marry a second wife. This is considered a shart which infringes upon the basic rights of a person. So you cannot, for example, put a condition in your nikah contract that if I marry you, you will not eat or you will not sleep. The same way, marriage is a basic right, so she cannot put this condition according to the Hanafi school. And even if she does, this can be considered like a wa'd, a promise, and if he marries, he will be breaking the promise, but it will not invalidate the marriage, and there will be no effect on his this marriage as well. So another, another thing actually with nikah is there's the mahar, but also a lot of times in the culture there's jahiz. I think in Arabic it's called jahaz or jihaz. Is that true? Like this? The girls' side, they give some things like preparatory money to set up the apartment, or these kinds of things. This is something which has no basis in, meaning it's not required from the girls' side. Now, back home, many of you may have noticed that there's, from the scholars, there's a lot of strictness against this. Why? Because there's, it's not economic. It's very difficult. A person who has 1, 3, 4 daughters, for every single, his earning capacity is very limited. And the more daughters you have, the more difficult it is. And this is why you see that the moment a family has a boy, that's full stop. They're not having any more kids. He had a boy, it means they're wrapping it up. So this is a big problem, and it should not be the case that girls are a burden. So if the family of the girl wants to give something outside of any social pressure, that's fine. There's no problem in that. Out of the goodness of their heart, they want to gift you have a lot of, I'm the father of the girl. I have a lot of money. Who are you to stop me? I'm going to give my daughter something. No problem. Or this is my son-in-law. I can give him whatever I want. I want to buy them a bedroom set. I want to buy them a fridge. I can do that if I want to give some money. But the problem is social pressure. There shouldn't be any social obligation to do this, where if the person doesn't do it, then people will talk. And this is why the ulama, they used to put a lot of pressure that don't do this and don't even accept it from the girl's side. Even if they do it back home, even if the girl's side, if they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, the ulama used to say, or they still say, don't accept it. Why? Because even though they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, this will kill the social pressure. So there's a hikmah in this also. But this is something which needs measurement. So the jahiz, this is something which makes girls, it makes it very difficult for them to marry. So it's a tradition which should be killed. And now you have the walima, right? After consummation, consummation, or even the bridal send-off when the girl is being sent, yes, there's no problem that the whole family or the tribe or whoever from the guy's side, they come and they take her. There should be no mixing in all of this, especially during the functions. The girl is, dressed up. She's, made up, and there shouldn't be israf as well. What is israf? Israf is spending outside of her means. One important thing to remember is israf is not an absolute. What is israf for you may not be israf for me. This is something many people struggle to understand. If someone is very wealthy, let's say he's a billionaire, for him to wear a Rolex watch, this is not israf. But if somebody, for him, his whole salary is, 50,000, and he's paying 1/5 of his salary to wear a Rolex watch, this is israf. But yet, even for the very wealthy person, innal badadata min al iman. The more simple you are, the more close to simplicity you are, the better it is, right? Even the Prophet ﷺ, he maintained simplicity. But at the same time, he was gifted very expensive clothes, which were worth thousands of dollars today, and he wore them to show that this is allowed. So it's not, if someone has a lot of wealth, it's not israf to spend an understandable, proportionate portion of that. But if somebody, out of consideration for the society, they don't want this kind of expectation to spread, they keep it closer to simplicity, this is better. the simpler it is, the easier it is. And the less takalluf you have, the less rituals you have, a lot of these rituals, they were created to celebrate. And a lot of these things come from the woman. They want to celebrate and express this joy, at every, corner. But these things cause problems. Anybody, who's cultured, they understand that with every single ritual or custom, you have probable tensions, not possible tensions, probable tensions. So the more you limit them, within reason, the better it is. But it doesn't also mean that we should be extremely rigid. Sometimes it's okay. There should also be some level of enjoyment also. It is an occasion of joy. It's an occasion of pleasure. So there should be within the bounds of Sharia, even the duff. The Prophet ﷺ said, you can play the duff. Now it doesn't mean in the masjid, but if there are, in many cultures, the women, they'll play the duff in the woman. There's no problem in this as long as there are no string instruments, no other musical instruments. The duff itself is allowed. So there should be an expressal of joy. Many people, they've taken simplicity to the point where you can't tell who the groom is. You can't tell who the groom is. No, there should be, but also it shouldn't be to the point where the girl, from her birth, she's been pumped that the marriage, like, okay, you have to buy, like, this is so important, where she's expecting a $5,000 wedding dress, and no, she should be tailored or raised with a normal expectation. A woman, the higher expectations she has, the more the red flags. Like if there's a woman, she wants a $10,000 wedding dress, and she's marrying a normal man, this is a big red flag. It's a big predictor that she's not going to be able to manage the finances properly, and there's going to be tension in this home. So after consummation, the walima should take place, and this is the sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He invites his family or his people and announces the nikah. Nikah should not stay hidden. Now, what we call a reception, the girl's function, this is something optional. This is not something mashru'. But, if the family of the girl, they also want to celebrate, usually this happens at the occasion of the bridal send-off, right? If they want to have a function, it happens before the walima, before the honeymoon night. So this is fine, they're allowed to do this, and in some cultures they actually do one function together where they share the expenses. Both of these are okay, but there should not be an expectation from the girl's side that they have to do it, where if they don't do it, they're held blameworthy. So because all of these things, we think it's simple. Sometimes for us, we have money, so 10,000, 15,000, it's not a big deal. But for someone else who doesn't have that much money, and it should never come to the point that every time I'm having a daughter, I'm just thinking that what's going to happen in the future. So that's why Allah has, and the Prophet ﷺ have put all the burden on the man. So the final things, we should focus on barakah, in this whole process. Look for, a pious person. Focus on simplicity, and, within reason. Like I said, even for what may be simplicity for one person may be extravagance to you. This is true also. So we should be simple within reason, and we should focus on barakah. We should be easygoing. We shouldn't catch small things and turn them into big problems. We shouldn't have big egos, where small things are, because of which small things turn into big things. And in all the functions, segregation should be maintained. There should, unfortunately, there's many places where there's dancing going on. The bride should never be seen. Photography, this is something which is itself, it's something mashkuk. Is it halal or haram? What did the Prophet ﷺ say? That kullu musawwirin fi an-nar. Every musawwir is in Jahannam. So this is an ikhtilafi mas'ala. It is. There are some ulama who say that this doesn't fall under tasweer, but so you should anyway by default have khawf. And now exposing the woman, you're taking the pictures, this is something scary. And it never used, for thousands of years people have lived without this. So now why do you need to see your wedding day every single day? Oh, I want to show my children. No problem. Let's say you have no pictures. What's going to happen? Rather, I think it looks childish. Like when you have, for example, imagine seeing your father in every stage of their life. You just go through Google Photos, every foolish selfie they took, standing in the bathroom mirror, taking a flex. Do you want to remember your great-grandfather like that? No, I'd rather have my great-grandfather, I only know his name. That's fine. There's waqar, there's haiba, like that. But now you can see his, maybe in the future, your great-grandchildren will have your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, and your Google Photos. They'll have access to everything. And they'll see every single, like, what kind of haiba will remain of you, right? So it's not needed, it's really not needed. And especially there are people, they just say they get a photography team, and then a male photographer comes, wallahi al-azim, and they're taking pictures of the bride. You don't have any ghaira. There's no ghaira in this person. So this is something amazing. And there should be it should not be allowed for the woman to take pictures. Why? Because they take pictures and they're very loose with it. They'll send it to other people on their groups. They'll share it with their husbands on their family groups. And now with AI, there's even more danger. Huge danger. You should be very careful, even when if you're sending the picture of the girl during the phase before the families have met. Let's say they're in another state. The picture should be sent very carefully. And it's either you can even send it as a one-time view once, but that may be a little bit, unreasonable. But you can communicate to the family, look, I'm sending you these pictures, but this is an amana. This is enough usually, and the other family understands if they're a reasonable family. So, inshallah, we can end at that. I think that covers mostly everything. But maybe there's something I left out. If anyone has any scenarios or any questions, inshallah, we can discuss those. I also have some scenarios, but we can just get into any questions now. Okay. Yeah, the function on the growth side. The main thing is that they should not feel pressure, but the reality is that it does happen, right? It does happen that there's pressure, and this is why actually the pressure should come from the guy's side. This is very important because the girl's side, depending on which culture you come from, in some cultures the girl's side has more strength, and in some cultures the man's side, the groom's side, has more strength. In the subcontinent culture, it's the groom's side. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of girl's side. They're equals. Okay, mashallah. So yeah, usually in our culture, the initiation of pressure to avoid customs. So for example, you're getting married as a man. Now, to ensure that your in-laws are not operating on pressure, they cannot say it, because if they leave out an important function, then maybe your mom will make a big deal out of it. So they have to kind of do it because they don't want their daughter to fall to come under pressure later on. That, oh, your family didn't even do this, they were so stingy, or XYZ. So your family has to be the one, or you yourself, who exerts that pressure that you don't need to do this, and kind of force them. But when you force it, it's like a force that reaches a certain point, that beyond this point, if they're still doing it, that they're doing it from their own heart, right? So that's kind of how it's done usually. Anything else? Yes. Is there ijab and qabul? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, they are man and wife. So remember, nikah, to be valid, it just requires 2 witnesses. So as long as that happens, they're man and wife. But yes, but one thing I just remembered, I forgot to mention, you have the concept which I said, bridal send-off, or ruksati. This actually has some sort of a parallel understanding in fiqh, which is, okay, let's say that the husband and wife, they get married. If they never find a moment of seclusion, let's say they get married but they didn't live together yet, and a year later he divorces her, then he only has to pay her half of her mahar, because they never were in seclusion. But if seclusion happens, means let's say they went out together, or they with or without the knowledge of the parents, then she is due her full mahar upon divorce. So sometimes, let's say that ruksati in our mind is the bridal send-off. Before that, seclusion may have already occurred. where the man, he had the opportunity to be alone with his wife. You can say it like that. Then, in this situation, the shar'i ruksati, or the shar'i bridal send-off, or that legal status has been achieved, so her full mahar is due, upon her. Yes. Yes, seclusion. Seclusion is the trigger of the ahkam, according to Hanafi fiqh. Now, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, but as far as I remember, because we usually, the other ones come up, but I don't think it would be vastly different. Otherwise, it would, something like that would come to mind. But you can check with the Shafi'i scholars. Yeah, converts. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if a husband and wife, one of them accepts Islam, let's say the man accepts Islam and the wife does not. If the wife is Ahl Kitab, then it's okay. It will remain if she's a proper Christian or Jew. But obviously he should be focused on making her a Muslim, because this is the basis upon which the marriage with the Kitabi is allowed. It's allowed because in general the men they have the power in marriage. So the woman is going to, he's going to have full control over his kids. They're going to be Muslim. That's a given. And she may also likely become Muslim. But now, because the roles are reversed, so now a lot of ulama will say that it's like not allowed to marry a Kitabi woman, because she will actually herself remain non-Muslim, make her kids non-Muslim, and maybe you'll become non-Muslim, but she's not going to become, like many cases, it's like this. Meaning when you're marrying her while she's still a Jew or a Christian, just because you are attracted to her, in that scenario. But now the other scenario is that the man, he becomes Muslim, the woman, she becomes Muslim. If the husband does not become Muslim and he refuses to, then they don't have a valid nikah anymore, and she cannot consummate, she cannot be with him, and she has to, it's mujahada, and it's difficult, and it's sacrifice, but Islam is not free. Islam is not free. There are many difficult ahkam. We have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that, that should be mentioned also. It should be mentioned that a lot of times when someone accepts Islam, a woman accepts Islam, we only say the nice things, but we don't really take it upon ourselves to fully educate them and bring their spirituality or their inner strength to the point where they're ready to face all these challenges. Because you need ruhani quwwah for this. So there should be things that make us strong inside, that the woman, she said, I cannot live with my husband anymore. What did, who was it? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. The wife of Ikrimah, radiallahu anhu, before he became Muslim, he came to her, and she said, she had accepted Islam. She said, you will not approach me. You're not going to come close to me. And he said, I was shocked that she was able to refuse me like this. He said, I was surprised. Maybe she really loved him, because naturally, Ikrimah radiallahu anhu, he was one of the leaders. So his wife, there's a good chance she saw him as a leader. She really loved him. But even Islam made her so strong that she was able to resist such a husband. Said, no, you're not going to come near me. So this actually makes the man, if I want my wife again, then I have to become Muslim. So it forces him, look, it doesn't mean he becomes Muslim for the sake of this, but at least if there's any ego, it shakes him and it forces him to think and judge Islam rationally now. So the other scenario you mentioned was, the normal so if there's a convert, then the community should help her, get married. But, how should this be done? It's very, it can be sensitive sometimes, because so ideally there should be women, the elderly women in the community. There should be women who are helping with matchmaking. This is very important. You know, women. There's many women. They have this natural kind of instinct and who are social. But these kinds of women, they should be promoted. And when I say promoted, I don't mean like promote their business. I mean they should be like encouraged. They should be encouraged, and they can help make matches. Because sometimes, imagine, you know, you're looking for a wife somewhere far away, but you don't know. Just down the street, someone has a daughter who's a very good match for your son. Or just, you know, next door, someone has a son who's a good match for your daughter. So it requires the people with that kind of sight to make that connection, and who are not shy, who will bring it up. And sometimes they'll push boundaries, but things happen. So, you know, this is very important. And even for the converts, they should, you know, look out for them. For male converts, also, you see, it's much more difficult to absorb the female converts. Why? Because taking a woman in is always easier than giving your daughter off. So giving your, and even when you marry if you marry a convert, you have to be very careful. Why? It doesn't mean that we are absolved of the response. We have to help them get married and so on and so forth. But a lot of times, the practical reality is that they have a past. And this past will always have an impact on their future marriages. Remember, Tawbah, or Al-Islam yahdimu ma qablahu. Islam forgives whatever came before it. But let's say a drug addict comes to your daughter for a proposal and he says, I made Tawbah. Or I just did Hajj. Al-Hajj yahdimu ma qablahu. So are you going to give your daughter in marriage to this person? When you have a perfectly good another proposal. Why? Because you know that his mind, he has 1,000 times more chance to go back to drugs. An addict, this is by nature. He can go back. So Tawbah doesn't mean you overlook obvious things. This is a sign of a foolish wali, a foolish father. So you have to be very careful. But in the case where there is a woman who's getting married, the imam can be her wali, you know, at the time of giving her off, if she doesn't have anyone. So the imam can be the wali, or some respected, you know, man. It should be a man, but the woman should help her get married. And for the man, of course, he doesn't need a wali. Anything else, inshallah, before we conclude? جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا.